I'm going to do a little old-fashioned Adventist preaching today. I'm going to talk about the second coming of Jesus. He's near. You hear me? Our Jesus is near, and we got our work to do before he comes. His name was Tom, and Tom had been working the late shift. Anybody here ever work a late shift? And at the end of the late shift, you're doing everything you can to keep your eyes open as you're driving home. And you might roll down the window, you might turn up the radio. Well, in Tom's case, Tom decided he was going to pick up his cell phone and phone his friend Dave and say, Dave, do whatever you can, bro, but you got to keep me awake. And so the two of them got actually into a heated discussion, and they were both a little animated. And as Tom was driving down the road, he wasn't paying attention to the road. He was paying attention to his conversation with Dave. And so it turned out Tom did not see the sign that said, road closed ahead. And so as he's driving down the road, imagine his surprise when he actually kind of wakes up, pays attention, and there's a road barrier in front of him. He blows through the barriers. He ends up going into the ditch. His car hits a tree, and he hits the steering wheel so hard it knocks him out. When he wakes up, there's lights flashing. There's the ambulance there. The police are there, and they're kind of checking Tom out. And, okay, Tom is well enough to get out of the car and to give a report to the police. And the police officer actually wanted to give him a breathalyzer because he thought he was drunk. And Tom was like, no, I wasn't drunk. Why do you think, why would you think I was drinking? Because the police officer said there had been road signs for the last 3 kilometers telling you the road was closed ahead. Have you ever noticed that sometimes we do not appreciate the importance of a sign until we miss it? Have you ever noticed that? Why do we have signs, church? Why do we have a sign? Right? Because they warn us, they tell us where we are, and they can direct us to where we're going or to steer us away from danger. Signs are important, and we fully understand and appreciate how important they are when we miss one. You know what I love about God? God has signs. We heard Adulton talk about it after Sabbath school today. God does nothing without communicating to his prophets, who communicate to who? The church. God doesn't do anything in heaven or on earth that would impact his church without letting his people know. And what I love about God is that the end of the world is coming, and God wants you to be prepared for it. Do you know that? Do you know that Jesus is not going to come for his church and leave the church unaware of when that coming will be? Now, do we know the exact day or hour? No, but do we have signs that will tell us when we're getting close? Is this biblical? You know the story, or at least I hope you do for those who don't. One day Jesus was out with his disciples, and they're on the top of what's called the Mount of Olives. Now, the Mount of Olives is tall enough that if you sit on the one side of it, you can overlook the city of Jerusalem, and at that time you could see Jerusalem and the temple. And it must have been an amazing sight, because the disciples were talking about how beautiful Jerusalem and especially the temple of God looked from that vantage point. And Jesus breaks out into tears. And the disciples are getting a little concerned. And they're like, Jesus, why are you crying? And Jesus basically says, I'm paraphrasing here, modern vernacular. He's saying, I've looked into the future of Jerusalem, and a day is coming when not one stone will be left upon another. And the disciples freak out. It doesn't use those words in the Bible, but they do. And let me tell you why they freak out. Because in the Jewish mind, the next time Jerusalem and the temple are destroyed, in their minds, that's the end of the world. Do you follow me? Maybe you've heard this before. So they're concerned about the idea that the world might end in their time. So afterwards, they come to Jesus, and we can read about it in Matthew chapter 24. It's verses 3 through 5. If you'd like to, grab your Bibles, turn with me to Matthew 24. We're going to spend a little time here today. The disciples approached Jesus, and this is what we read in Matthew 24. Now, as he, Jesus, sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, "Tell us, when will these things be, and what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age?" Do you catch the question? Do you see what's going on in their minds? If the temple and Jerusalem are going to be destroyed, that must mean it's the end of the world as we know it. And for them, the destruction of Jerusalem and the end of the world were the same event. Now, church, let me ask you, were they the same event? No. How do you know this? Because you're still here, right? Amen? So, in their minds, it's one event, but for Jesus, he understands it's two. And yet, follow me here, because a lot of us miss this when we tell this story. What Jesus is about to share with them is a set of signs. Hear me out. There's a set of signs that will indicate to them when Jerusalem is about to fall, and then Jesus will use those exact same signs to indicate to us he's coming again. Do you hear me? The signs you read in Matthew 24 predict the fall of Jerusalem, and they also predict the second coming of Jesus Christ. Are you following me today? And I believe Jesus does this, and I believe God does this in order to increase our faith. Because if Jesus can accurately predict the fall of Jerusalem using these same signs, do you think he can accurately predict the second coming using the same set of signs? Right? If they were fulfilled back then, do you think he can fulfill them today? So we have two questions. What did Jesus say would be the signs of his coming and the end of the age, the end of the world as you know it? And are these signs now being fulfilled today? Were they fulfilled for Jerusalem? Absolutely. Did Jerusalem and the temple fall? So we know the signs were fulfilled then, but are they actually applicable to us today? And that's what I want to explore with you. Jesus gave them approximately 10 signs. And we know them to be, first of all, false religious teachers. Jesus referred to them as false messiahs, but today we would call these false religious teachers. He said there would be war and destruction, a lack of peace, famines, pestilences, earthquakes, increased immorality. We should add to this increased violence, economic uncertainty, technological advances. Can I ask you, have you witnessed any of these in your day? Absolutely. Let's talk about that first one. And again, I'm not going to go in depth in all of them. I don't have the time for that today. I'm going to assume you know some of this. And if you don't, we'll have a Bible study on it on Wednesday nights coming up, so you can follow for more at that time. So let's talk about false religious teachers. Here's what Jesus said. And Jesus answered and said to them, "Take heed that no one deceives you, for many will come in my name, saying, 'I am the Christ,' and will deceive many." In other words, there are going to be a lot of religious-sounding voices out there that are going to try and capture your attention. Have you noticed this? Are there a lot of religious voices out there? Do you know what the goal of a religious voice is? To capture your attention so that I can change what you believe, because if I can change what you believe, what can I change? How you behave. There are a lot of religious voices out there trying to change your beliefs so that they can capture and influence your behavior. Jesus said, before I come again, there's going to be a lot of false messiahs, a lot of false religious voices out there. Here's what we've learned. This was a study that was conducted by the Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary. Right now, we're told that there are 43,000 different churches in North America today. 15 years ago, that was 33,000. Today, it's 43,000. Right now, 20 new religions seem to pop up every single year. Notice it didn't say Christian churches. Notice it didn't say Christian churches. It said 20 new religions are popping up every single year. And every single one of them want your attention. Every single one of them want your ear. Every single one of them want to convince you of their truth so that I can control, or influence at least, how you behave. Was Jesus correct when he said there would be an explosion of religious voices in the last days? Next, we have signs in the physical world, and Jesus gave us 4. They would be wars, famines, pestilences, and earthquakes. Now, somebody had come up to me. It was a family member, non-believer, and they said, well, come on, Bob. We've always had wars, famines, pestilences, and earthquakes. Nothing new here. And they're right. Have we always had these things? Can we concede to that? But Jesus didn't just say you would have wars and famines and pestilences and earthquakes. He actually compared it to that of a birth. Now, I've never given birth, but I have been a part of the process. I've been involved in the process. And when my firstborn was being born and conceived and we're getting ready for the delivery, it kind of started out with, and ladies, you might remember this, does it begin and end with, ooh, I got a contraction? Does it end there? Does it begin there? Now, let me ask you something. Between the first contraction and the last, which one is more intense? The last one. So what I'm hearing from you ladies, because I haven't given birth, is that it with each contraction, it intensifies and it repeats a little bit more quickly. Like you might have 20 minutes and you get down to 10 and 5 and 4, and it's like we got the countdown, the baby's coming. But notice, the first contraction is not as strong as the last. Jesus is telling us, I want you to hear this, because every single one of these signs have a destructive element to them. Did you notice this? They are all destructive, and what Jesus is saying, it's not that you just had them always, but as you get closer to the end of time, they will become more destructive and they will happen more often. Am I making sense? Do you follow Jesus' analogy of labor? And so let's talk about wars, because we're really good at this. Jesus said in verses 6 and 8, and you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. So Jesus recognizes you're going to have wars, but that's not quite the end. But now listen to what he has to say next. For nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. Are we seeing this today? You are living in this time. Now, and he says, and there will be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in various places, and all of these are the beginning of what? Is it the end or the beginning? Which tells me something greater is coming. Do you follow what he's saying? It's going to get worse before Jesus comes. So, now we've seen these statistics before. We've become really good at killing each other. You know these numbers. World War II, we killed 20 million people. World War II, 55 million people. The Rwandan Civil War, where we're close to 1 million people. Korean War was 3 million people. Vietnam War, 3 million people. Sudanese Civil War, 2 million people. We have been told that in the 21st century, conflicts have sharply increased since 2010. In other words, we're having more of them. Now, another statistic that actually threw me was this when I first heard it. Over the past 3,400 years, the world has been entirely at peace for only 268 of those years, or 8% of recorded human history. Now, you might say, well, again, Pastor Bob, we've always had war. It's always been with us. But here's the thing. We've gotten so much better at it. All of those numbers I showed you, those millions of numbers, 8 billion people on the planet, and we can kill them all in one day. Do you hear me? We are now capable of wiping out the entire human race in one day. We have made World War I and II look like it was fought with sticks and stones. Our weapons of warfare have become oh so much better. You know, we used to have machine guns and tanks, and by the way, modern tanks and machine guns are pretty effective. But we've gone one step further. Now we go to missiles and to bombs. As a matter of fact, we have stealth bombers and we have drones. A 19-year-old kid can be sitting in Washington, D.C., and with a joystick wipe out a city of millions of people. We don't have to put a person in a plane anymore. We just have to give them a joystick and we can kill you from anywhere you are on the planet. We have become really good at this. Jesus said, that's the beginning of sorrows. We have germ warfare. We have chemical warfare. Of course, you know I'm talking about the nuclear bomb, and now we're engaged in cyber warfare. There is not an aspect of the human life in which we don't know how to go to war with you, or attack you, or destroy your life. We are good at this on a scale history has never seen before. Did Jesus get this one right? Famines. Now, most of us, when we think of a famine, we tend to think of a scene like this where it's desert and it's dry. But here's the thing. A famine is simply the inability of an ecosystem to grow food. Do you hear me? A famine is the inability of an ecosystem to grow food, so it can be desert-like, it could be flood-like, it could be wiped out by a chemical attack or whatever. But here's what we know. 9 million people die of hunger and hunger-related diseases every single year. 820 million people suffer from hunger or malnutrition in the world today. We just received a report. 1 in 4 Canadians are now considered to be poor. 1 in 4 Canadians are now considered to be poor. 2 million Canadians a month go to food banks, and we have tent cities popping up all over the place because we don't have houses for everybody. And we're one of the G7 nations. Did you hear me? We're one of the G7, and we've got people who are going hungry. Then we have pestilence. Can anybody tell me what a pestilence is? It's an infectious disease that will either harm you or kill you. That's what a pestilence is. An infectious disease that will either harm you or kill you. Have we seen a few pestilences in the last couple of years? Yeah, absolutely. Right? According to the World Health Organization, infectious diseases kill over 17 million people a year. Anybody remember mad cow? Understand it still exists, they're just better at covering it up. We didn't find a cure for it. How about the bird flu or the swine flu? Stay away from the pork chops. Ebola. How about you remember when that one came out? How about H1N1? And of course, we just lived through COVID-19. Folks, here's the thing. The Bible does not distinguish between a natural and a man-made pestilence. You hear what I just said? It does not distinguish between a pestilence that Mother Nature created because of sin or one we cooked up in a lab. We are more likely to wipe ourselves out because of what we cooked up in a lab than what Mother Nature is cooking up on its own. Did Jesus get it right? Oh, absolutely. So how about earthquakes? Now, we've had earthquakes down through the centuries, but now look at what the National Earthquake Institute Center says. They detect some 20,000 earthquakes per year, or 55 a day. Just in the first 20 years of the 21st century, we had at least 6 earthquakes that were 8.5 or more on the Richter scale. That will wreck your day. And the top 10 earthquakes of the 21st century have caused over $650 billion in damages. Natural disasters have been increasing every year due to various factors such as urbanization, population growth, destruction of natural environment, and climate change. In other words, folks, the earthquakes are going to become stronger. The hurricanes are going to become more destructive. The tornadoes are going to become bigger. What's been hitting us has been the beginning of sorrows, but it's going to get worse before it gets better. And we've been seeing this. Keep an eye on Tornado Alley. Folks, signs in the social world. Look at what Paul wrote in 2 Timothy 3, 1-5. And now this is a prophecy concerning the end of time. Paul's prophesying. But know this, that in the last days, perilous times will come. For men will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, unloving, unforgiving, slanderers, without self-control, brutal, despisers of good. Quite a long list, eh? He's not done. Traitors, headstrong, haughty, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having a form of godliness but denying its power thereof. This is Paul's list. If I were to break this down, before Jesus comes, the world is going to be filled with self-absorbed, narcissistic people who only care about one thing, themselves. Do you understand that this is going to be a world lacking in compassion, sympathy, and mercy? Do you know who the people in society are that are incapable of kindness, compassion, sympathy, and empathy? We have a diagnosis for those people. It's sociopathic. An inability to relate to the pain and suffering of another human being. And the world is going to be filled with those people, where all I care about is me and not you. Your suffering matters not to me. Your pain matters not to me. As a matter of fact, I will have no problems using you, exploiting you, and disposing of you if it benefits me. Can I ask, are we living in a world that's a little obsessed with itself? Social media has turned us into a world of self-absorbed narcissists. And it has provided us with the tools on a level to exploit one another for money like we've never seen. Oh, there's still some good in the world. Oh, there's still some really decent human beings out there. But as we get closer to the second coming of Jesus, empathy and sympathy, kindness and compassion will be gone. Imagine that kind of world. Jesus said there's some signs. There's signs along the way, and understand, Jesus does not want you to miss a single sign. So here they are again. False religious teachers, war and destruction, a lack of peace, famines, pestilences, earthquakes, increased immorality, increased violence, economic uncertainty, and technological advances. And here's what Jesus said. So you also, when you see all these things, have you seen them? So I'm taking it a lot of you haven't. Have you seen them? Then he says, no. If you're saying you've seen it, then Jesus is saying, know that it is near. It's at the doors. So you might be wondering, what does this have to do with being a contagious Seventh-day Adventist? I preached it before, and I'm going to say it again. You have been called by God to do something for God, and that is to tell the world what you know. Do you know the signs? You told me you've seen them. Do you know the signs? Oh, you've all gotten so quiet on me this morning because this is where it gets real. You've never had an evangelist apply it this way. Jesus is coming again. He's at the door. Come on. When the snowstorm warning went out, I received emails and phone calls saying, hey, get prepared for the coming storm. When the Ottawa River threatens to flood, we get emails and warnings about the flood. If we were to hear about a tornado coming to our area, we all call each other up to warn our friends and neighbors and family, tornado's coming. Whenever we know something bad is about to happen to those we love and care about, we get on the phone, we get on the text, we make sure the people we love know about it. I'm dry, I'm sorry. So why wouldn't you let them know? Jesus is at the door. Why wouldn't you let them know the end of all things is upon us? And if you're not ready, thank you, you'll be gone with it. Ellen White painted a scene that when I read it never left my mind. It is the end. It's the time of trouble. It's game over. The next thing that happens, close of probation and Jesus comes. Disaster everywhere. And there are people who come up to those who were saved and said, you knew? You knew? You knew this was going to happen, and you didn't love me enough to tell me. We are so afraid of offending people and not sharing our faith. We are so afraid of them that we avoid this, and it's going to cost them their salvation. I remember something Sean Boonstra said. He said, I remember the first time a Christian approached me and shared their faith, and they offended me. And he said, thank God they offended me because today I am saved. I want you to become contagious. I want you to learn how to share your faith in non-offensive ways, so that nobody will ever be able to come up to you and say, why didn't you tell me? I'm telling you. I want you to hear me. He's at the door. If nobody has ever told you before, hear me today. Jesus Christ is at the door. The signs are there. They're everywhere. And if Jesus could successfully and accurately predict the fall of Jerusalem in 70 AD, do you think he can accurately predict his own second coming? Church, we're close. We are so close. Please go home today and say, please, dear God, help me to learn how to become contagious. Why? Because the end is near.